One. All right. We are live with safehome.org, and today we are talking all about bulletproof doors, safe rooms, and how to protect yourself in a rapidly changing world. I'm Rob Gabriel with safehome.org, and I'm here with Sam Fish from Shield Security Doors. And Sam is a third-generation security expert. And since starting Shield in 2013, he's helped bring the kind of high security doors that you find in Europe to homes here in the US. Today, Sam is the go-to for everyone from celebrities and Fortune 500s to regular homeowners who just want serious peace of mind. Like always, we'll be doing a live Q&A throughout. So if you have any questions at all, please drop those in the chat at any time. And I see people are already joining the stream now. Hey, everybody, please say hello in the chat and we'll get this thing going. Hey, Sam, how you doing today?
Doing all right, Rob. How about yourself?
Doing great. Awesome to have you. So
thank you for having me on. Thanks for the opportunity.
Excellent. Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So how did you get into the security door business and kind of like what drew you to it?
My father was a locksmith. My grandfather was a locksmith. Mm-hmm. My father started a key and lock company called Ilko Unican. They were the largest key manufacturer in the world and made every different type of lock you could imagine. Growing up, when I had a day off from school, or any of my siblings, we went to work in the factory. That's just what we did. And I thought all kids went to work in factories on their days off. Kind of sounds a little bit like child labor, but that's just what we did. My dad always had us in the factory working and learning and gaining an appreciation for how things get made. I went to college, thought I was going to go off and do all sorts of other things. Was working for the government in 2012, and we had across the board budget cutbacks called sequestration, where they cut 10% of everything. And I was part of that 10% that was lobbed off the government budget. And then this opportunity presented itself, and it just felt like my DNA pulling me back to where I was meant to be and what I was meant to be doing. So it took a little bit of a roundabout route to get there, but the security, keys, locks are really in my DNA.
Yeah, sounds like a true family kind of lineage here, and you have found your place, it seems. So that's great. And so like, who buys your products? Are we talking like celebrities, government, buildings, or just safety conscious homeowners? And kind of like what are your core offerings as well?
Everyone you could imagine, from G7 heads of state, Middle Eastern royal families, celebrities, call them titans of industry, the wealthiest people in the world, and then down to more or less regular people.
Yeah.
It really covers the entire spectrum. We typically think in the US about security doors, safe rooms, as really being the domain of the rich and famous, which it traditionally has been in the US. We don't have a culture of security doors here as exists overseas in Europe and the Middle East. We have a gun culture, which is very unique to America, but we don't have that security door culture. And so that's something that we've been working on over the last decade to expand. If you go to any middle-class apartment in Europe, in Israel, in a lot of different places, you will find a steel door with a multi-point lock and a decorative skin on it to make it look like a nice door. That is common. It's not some luxury, high-end product that only the rich can afford. Everyone has these. We don't have that in the US by a long shot. So there are real differences in where this security door culture has developed in the 20th century primarily, and where it hasn't. So that's been a big thing that we've been working to change and make security doors not just something that the rich and famous can afford.
Yeah, that's great context. Do you feel like more people outside of that set, like the rich and the famous or celebrities, do you feel like more people are kind of, purchasing from you or like kind of adopting the importance of the security doors?
They are certainly an easier market and an easier customer. One, because from a cost perspective, they have the budget for it, and two, because they typically are more aware of their own security risks and vulnerabilities, and perhaps they've received threats, they've had stalkers, things like that. So
Yeah.
there is certainly greater awareness as to the existence of this type of product, but also to their specific need for it. Regular people, one of the things Americans love to say is, and this is all our psychology, I live in such a safe neighborhood, I don't even lock my doors at night.
Hmm.
We love that psychology. We all have friends or family who say it, who think it, who do it. I live in a gated community. I don't lock my doors at night. That's our psychology. And
Yeah.
so when you're trying to break into that mentality with a security door, with a high security product, it's a bit of a steep hill
Hmm.
because you're starting with a base of people, and it's about 25-30% of Americans who don't lock their doors at night.
Hmm.
So you're starting with a base of people who don't even use the existing tools at their disposal, which is the lock on their door.
Right.
So sometimes it can be an uphill battle.
Yeah, we find that a lot with people who purchase home security systems and set those up. They'll use them for the first, few days or few weeks or few months, and then life gets busy and you forget to arm it at night, and then it's like, well, you have this, $500,000 system set up that you don't use, and it's giving you zero protection. So absolutely, we have to do the baseline: lock the doors, alarm the
Yeah.
system. Right.
And it's about making it part of people's routines.
Yes, that's right. So kind of like talk about what is a security door anyway. So you mentioned like multi-layered steel, and like different like lock points,
Yep.
maybe different deadbolts in that. And then maybe as importantly, what is not a security door?
So typically, when we think of a security door, the first thing that comes to mind for us is a bulletproof door.
Hmm.
That's where our minds go first. Again, because we are a gun culture. So we think, okay, a door that can stop a bullet, that's a security door. And
Hmm.
that's partially true. But the better explanation of what a security door is or should be is forced entry resistance. How
Hmm.
hard is it to break through that door with tools, with a crowbar, with an axe, sledgehammers, battering rams, those type of things? How hard is it to break through? The example I give, we can build a fantastic door that will stop a 7.62 round fired out of like an AK-47 type weapon.
Hmm.
It's great. It'll stop lots of those rounds.
Yeah.
But if I can pry that door open in 10 to 15 seconds with a crowbar, because it's not well engineered from a locking standpoint, well,
Hmm.
then that door isn't going to stop many bullets when it's open.
Right.
So that's why the most important element of a security door is forced entry resistance. How hard is it to break through? There are a lot of different standards that you can test doors to and
Hmm.
different levels. One of the standards we use is the US State Department standard. So it's what the government uses for doors and windows at all of our embassies and consulates overseas. And there we basically have what's called the onion approach. So for the outermost entry points, outermost doors and windows, you have your lowest level of security, which is the 5-minute forced entry. And then as you get closer and closer to the heart of the embassy, you have higher levels. So
Hmm.
5 on your outside perimeter, then 15 minutes, then 60 minutes for the most sensitive areas. So it's that kind of onion approach.
Wow.
Now, when you're using that in a residential setting, we're not talking about a U.S. embassy overseas. There are different ways of approaching it, and also that lowest level of security, the 5-minute forced entry, for the vast majority of people is going to be more than adequate. Because what a 5-minute forced entry door means is it's been subjected to 30 man-minutes of attack time. It's a 2-man team. They spend 5 minutes on the center of the door, 5 minutes on the lock side, 5 minutes on the hinge side. It's 30 man-minutes. The 15-minute door, and some of our clients will say, 15, that doesn't sound like very much. I live in a rural part. The police response times here are 20 minutes. I say, okay, 15-minute door, the FE15 door, FE is forced entry. Mm-hmm. That's a 6-man team. They spend 15 minutes on each attack point. That's 4.5 man-hours of attack time. I don't know a lot of people who need more than that. Right. Because the purpose of these doors is not where you're going to hide behind to ride out the zombie apocalypse. Mm-hmm. This is to keep you safe until the cops can arrive.
Right.
That's the purpose of it. So all this to say, and I went a bit on a tangent there, what makes a security door? The most important aspect is the forced entry resistance. How we get there on our doors is 1, multi-point locking systems. So normally we're accustomed to a 1-inch deadbolt. You flip your key or your thumb turn, a 1-inch deadbolt comes out. Yeah. On our doors, you have anywhere from 10 to 16 locking points. So you're turning the key, it's moving bolts all around the perimeter of the door.
Wow.
So that's 1, that multi-point locking system. 2, what the door is made of, steel primarily, and the engineering, the profiles, the reinforcements inside of the door that help strengthen it. So multi-point locking system, the steel construction, steel frame as well. And lastly, I think the real secret of it is making them not look like security doors. These decorative wood skins that we put over our doors ensure that they don't look like security doors. If you replace your front door, and will often match existing doors, no one knows. Your neighbor's never going to know the difference because it looks the same as it was before. Nice residential looking door. If it's an interior door in the home, match the other doors so it doesn't stand out, doesn't draw any attention to it. And so that aspect of it, that the key to good security, the secret to good security is keeping it a secret.
Right. Okay.
That's a really important aspect of security doors and windows, that they don't look like security doors. They don't look like security doors. They're not these ugly industrial or commercial looking doors that come to mind when we close our eyes and think about security doors. The reason we focus on residential, or really the intersection between security and aesthetics, is because there are plenty of companies in the US that do great industrial commercial security doors. Great product, ugly to look at. People don't want that in their homes.
No.
They want something that's going to blend in with the design and architecture of the home and not draw any attention to it.
Right. Yeah, that the aesthetic I'm sure is really important for homeowners, but then also if it looks like a security door, it might make people think, well, there's something they're trying to secure in that home that's worth going after maybe. So, right. So this is great. We have a lot of people here in the chat. Hey, James, Rye, Maya, Deanna. Hello, everybody. Sky, Simone, Sherry. We have this great question from Maya that I'm going to put here on the screen. And she asks, what is the reason these doors are more common in places like Europe? Is it purely cultural? It's interesting because homes in those places are often apartments versus single family homes in the US.
Excellent question. I don't know the exact answer as to why these have developed culturally to be more common. I think part of it has to do with the base of manufacturing. For example, I think Italy is probably the epicenter of it in Europe. There are lots of high security door manufacturers. All of the best locks, multi-point locks, are made in Italy. Um, as to how and why that emerged,
Mhm.
I think really post World War II, I'm not sure of the answer. I've tried researching it. I've tried asking people whom I know that have been in this industry a lot longer than I have. I don't know the answer,
Yeah.
but it's glaringly obvious
Yeah.
that it exists this way. Because
Mhm.
again, you don't need to go to a fancy apartment. Like if even in parts of Eastern Europe, if an apartment building is going up, every door, every apartment door is a steel door with a multi-point lock.
Yeah.
You won't find anything else. That's that's the standard. That's what everyone has, what everyone's accustomed to. Um,
Yeah.
but as to why, I wish I had the answer.
Yeah. I wonder if that's just kind of the builder grade there. Is that kind of what you're seeing? Like that's just the standard baseline. They're not going to, companies like yours to reinforce their doors.
No, they're not.
Right. Okay.
There are
Yeah.
local manufacturers of security doors, not to the same grade that we do, but
Right.
a good basic level of security door that blows anything you would find on an American apartment, blows it out of the water.
Oh yeah.
No comparison. Um,
Yeah. I mean, even I can kick down like an apartment door, and that's like saying a lot. So, um,
yeah.
excellent. So we have another question here. I'm curious about this one as well. Simone asks, and how does this key look? I mean, if it's turning 16 or
Sure.
so deadbolts, it's like an old, like,
So,
those big castle keys or,
no,
okay.
looks like an ordinary key.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
nothing. It's obviously a very high security key, bump resistant, all those things
Yeah.
um, that make it a lot harder uh, to pick, or virtually impossible to pick.
Hmm.
But regular looking key,
Yeah.
nothing too special about it in terms of what it looks like.
Yeah. So are there any like internal electronic components that allow, the deadbolts to move smoothly, or is it just all kind of mechanical?
Everything's mechanical. We have two different types of locks. One purely mechanical, one electromechanical. And
Mhm.
that allows you to tie in the bells and whistles, the keypad, biometric scanners, or integrate it with a third-party access control system, which a lot of our clients do. So there are those two options there. The basic footprint of the lock is the same. That
Mhm.
doesn't change. The number of locking points doesn't change. It's just the functionality of it
Okay.
that allows you to tie in the bells and whistles.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. And Maya says here, she follows up. I lived in France for a year. It hadn't occurred to me, but as I think back, I'm remembering that the front doors were always quite heavy. Very interesting. And I've
Yeah,
spent some time in South America, in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, and they also have a lot of these doors, but that's also a very European country for
yeah,
Latin America. So,
yeah. Very very strong Italian influence in
mhm.
Argentina, and in Latin America, you've seen it. You'll be turning the key or the thumb turn on the inside, and we're accustomed to one, maybe 90-degree rotation, 180 degrees. But there, you're turning the key, one full rotation, and oh wait, I got to
Yeah,
keep going. I got to keep going. I got to keep going.
that's right.
That's a function of the type of cylinder, which is a Euro profile cylinder that we use on our doors as well. But it
Mhm.
requires additional turns because you're throwing the bolts a lot further
Yeah.
than with a typical 1-inch deadbolt.
Mhm.
So that's another common memory that people will have of dealing with European doors. Like, oh yeah, I used to
That's right.
stand there turning it over and over and over
Yeah.
and over before it was fully locked.
It's like, did I strip this thing or what?
Yeah.
All right, we have another question here. This is from Sky. She asks, do you work with house developers that automatically put these in the homes that they build? Or is this an aftermarket feature that individuals modify their home with? Or maybe like a combination of both? I don't know.
Yeah, it's some of both. It's rare that we'll have a developer who is maybe building 5, 10, 20 homes and they're putting them in all of them. we do pitch that often to developers because whether it's security front door, a safe room in the home, something, it's such a great value added that commands a much higher premium than the actual cost of putting it in. But typically, it'll be a developer or a builder who's building a home for a customer, and the customer has driven that requirement for security doors or windows, or they have specific security features that they want. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then Sky also asks, or she says, the apartment I live in has a heavy metal door with multiple locks, similar to what you mentioned in Europe. And I wonder, I'm curious, is that maybe a newer build? Is this something that you see to your local area, Sky? Curious to know about that. But are you seeing maybe a bit more builders thinking about this sort of added security in building homes? Because this clearly
Builders,
is
no.
aftermarket.
No,
Okay.
I'm not seeing it from builders.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll come from the architects,
Yep.
but the builders themselves are just trying to put up the bare minimum of what they need.
Yeah.
It's rare that they will be interested in upping the security because it's also upping the cost for them. And unless they really know that there's going to be an ROI on that it's going to deliver for them, they're not going to take that risk. They're just going to, they'll focus maybe more on the aesthetics,
right?
Not security.
Got it. Are you guys doing anything for windows? Because like doors are one thing, but if there are, windows around the perimeter, those are pretty, they're not very bulletproof typically.
Yeah.
smash and grab.
Yeah, we do a full range of security windows as well. Windows are almost more complicated than doors because there's so many different types of windows. You can have what's called a fixed picture window, which is basically just a piece of glass in a frame. You can have a casement window that swings in or out, a single or double hung window that slide up, awning windows that tilt in or out. So there are a lot of different types of windows, and as a result, different requirements there, and clients will want to match different styles.
Right.
All of the ones I just listed are window types that we make. So yeah, oftentimes we might be doing a project where it's 3 or 4 doors, but it's 20 windows.
Yeah.
And there will often be matching the level of security that the doors have as well. Or it might, the first floor might be higher level, the upper floors might be a lower level because it just has a lower risk when it's not on the ground floor. So you don't necessarily need the same level of security the higher up you go.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Unless, of course, there's like a balcony and that kind of thing, those access points. We always recommend that those entry points are secure with like a sensor of sorts, whether it's the glass break sensor, an entry sensor, that sort of thing. But yeah, I guess my second story windows out of, in my front, no one's coming out with a ladder and like climbing up there and checking to see if it's unlocked. I mean, maybe I wouldn't put it past some people if they see the window ajar, they could potentially breach access that way.
But that requires an additional level of planning. It's not someone who's opportunistically looking for a house to break into, sees a window open on the second floor and know, I can get up. No, they've got to be a little bit more prepared with something like a ladder to get in there.
Right. Yep. So yeah, Sky does. She says it is a newer build. Thankfully, it doesn't have to turn 100 times. It's funny. This is another great question here, actually. So Maya asks, what happens if you get locked out what happens if you get locked out or lose the key? Do locksmiths need special skills or tools to work with these doors, or like what happens? Yeah.
So typically, you would really need to lose the key and not have access to any of the spare keys. And we always provide 3 keys with every door. We can always have new keys made, but yeah, that takes a day or two. Um,
Yeah.
so if you're truly locked out of your house and you've lost the key, then yeah, unfortunately, short of breaking the door down,
Hmm.
which is going to be very challenging, uh,
Hmm.
you kind of someone would call us, and either a local locksmith, we would tell them the information that they need in order to duplicate a key, or you have to wait a day or two, unless there's another entry point into a home where you could that you could go through, like a back door or something like that, assuming it's you've lost
Yeah.
the front door key.
Right.
Yeah.
From the sounds of it, it sounds like it would probably be easier to like bore through the side of the house than to like break down the door if you lost your key.
It
Which,
sometimes is.
yeah.
We had a case a couple of years ago. One of our clients, and here in New York, this was in the winter, and a frozen pipe sensor went off in their
Mm.
basement. They weren't home. The fire department came and tried going through a lower level door.
Hmm.
They couldn't get in, and this wasn't even an exceptionally high security door that we had there. It was kind of a
Yeah.
base model, and eventually they tried going through with jaws of life. They
Wow.
couldn't get the door open, and we
Wow.
had never seen that kind of hydraulic testing on our doors before, so it was a pretty neat experience. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're not really going to have a chance unless you have a lot of time, and even then, with a hydraulic tool like jaws of life, they couldn't get it.
Yeah.
So
You got to put that in your marketing.
yeah.
Awesome. Yep. Thanks for that question, Maya. Here's a question from Deanna. She asks, how do you test these doors? Is the process the same across different builds? I know you kind of mentioned like the rating system earlier, but what does that kind of like look like, brass tacks maybe?
So we send our doors to independent testing laboratories,
Hmm.
both here in the US and in Europe, so that it's independently done to ensure that our doors meet those forced entry standards, the
Hmm.
US State Department one, as well as a European forced entry standard. And so there we will make several samples. They put them up into a test rig, and then follow according to the procedures of the testing standard, all the specific tools that they're allowed to use, the amount of time that they're allowed to use, and they attack the doors either until you pass the test, or sometimes you'll pass the test. Oh, sometimes we'll fail the test. We failed tests early on when we first started out, but
Yeah.
once you've passed the test, you can either say, okay, good, stop, tools down, or you can say, let's test until failure.
Mm.
I know we're good. I know I've passed the test here, but I want to see how far or how long this will hold out for. And what that will sometimes inform you is like, oh, you know what? Maybe we've actually over-engineered something.
Hmm.
Maybe we've made the door stronger than it needs to be in order to meet this level of security.
Hmm.
Maybe we can reduce the cost a little bit by taking some things out that aren't needed.
Yeah.
So testing to failure is a really interesting uh, part of it as well, because it pushes your product to the limit,
Hmm.
and you get a really good sense of how far it'll go. And also, every single time we've done testing, we've learned really important things about
Yeah.
our doors and windows, about the weaknesses. We can design and engineer something and think that it's going to work a particular way, but then the moment it actually starts getting tested in a laboratory, that's when reality comes home to roost, and
Yeah.
you see how things are actually holding up to a really intense attack.
Right. Yeah, and I imagine Shield Security Doors isn't the only player in the game, of course, right? Like you have competitors. What is
Yep.
like, in your opinion, what is a competitive advantage that like you bring to the market that like other companies don't have? Like what sets you apart, whether it's like your doors, the window solutions that you have, or the idea of like these safe rooms that you guys engineer, which I want to talk more about in a bit. But like, yeah, what do you guys have that others don't?
So from a design approach, a design and engineering approach, I often go out and do service calls
Mm-hmm.
because I learn so much doing that about what are the weak points in our products? What can we do to make our doors and windows more serviceable, easier to service? Again, we can build a great door, but if it's impossible to fix, if it's impossible to repair, if you don't have easy access to the potential failure points, then you're not leaving your customers in a great position long term, because when something goes wrong, they're not going to be able to fix it. So I focus so much on serviceability.
Yeah.
And I can tell you stories about why specific screws in our doors are where they are, the way we put them in, when we put them in, and why we put them in to make the doors more serviceable. About 8 or 9 years ago, we had one of our largest customers, and they had been using doors made by an Italian manufactured security doors. I think the Italians do the most beautiful design work, second to none. The stuff is spectacular. These look like beautiful architectural doors.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue this client was having, and they had electronic locks, is anytime, and this is a client with literally hundreds of doors, hundreds of security doors. Anytime they needed to make an update to the software on the locks or something like that, the door had to be taken off the hinges. You had to remove decorative skins. Then you had access to the lock to do your 5 minutes of firmware upgrades.
Yeah.
Then you had to put everything back together, rehang it, test it. And God forbid something had gone wrong in that process, you had to start over. So 5 minutes of firmware upgrades were taking 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
And across the number of doors that they had, it was a never-ending process. So when they came to us and said, okay, how can you make life easier for us in this respect? We designed an electronic shelf by the hinges. So there were 4 screws holding in that electronic shelf. Your 5 minutes of firmware upgrades now took 7 minutes. You didn't have to take anything off. And there was this element of serviceability that was driving our design that just made everything so much easier. And now their service and maintenance company could go through 20, 30, 40 doors in a day as opposed to 2 or 3.
Right.
That's one huge driving factor for us, is making our doors easily serviceable. Because inevitably, these doors and windows, they're machines. There are a lot of moving parts in them. Things break, things go wrong.
Yeah.
Ensuring that you can service them. So that's one very important distinguishing factor. The second, we're all made in America. That is, and this is a recent development. We set up this factory in 2020, late 2024. We manufactured overseas for north of a decade. At times it went well, at times it didn't.
Yeah.
Being in control of our production and doing it in America, and that was something that my father really instilled in me as well. He had factories all around the world, but several in the US, several in Canada. He always said, manufacture your products where you sell them. You will never go wrong following that principle.
Sure.
So we are the only ones making these types of security doors in America, these custom high security doors in America. So that I would say is the other really big distinguishing factor. We're not reliant on overseas freight, ocean freight, or air freight anymore. We stock all of the parts at our factory in North Carolina. Nothing has to come from overseas anymore. So I would say that's another very critical distinguishing factor for us.
Yeah, excellent. Those sound like great core values and principles you guys have. So we have another question here. This is from security.org. They ask, how do you determine what kind of security doors and windows are best for a homeowner?
The vast majority of some of the time, the client will come and say, hey, I want XYZ. These are my requirements. Often that'll be based on bullet resistance. So they'll say, I want a door that can stop handguns, or I want a door that can stop rifles. Sometimes that criteria will be coming from the customer. Oftentimes it's a conversation where I'll say to them, what's your concern? What are you trying to protect against? Is it opportunistic crime? Great. Or maybe you are on a local mob hit list and you have a very real reason to fear for your life. Then that's a different threat scenario that we're talking about. Politicians, very different threat scenario. So I will try and go through those questions to determine, if they don't know what they want, what are they concerned about? What threats are they facing? Is it just, hey, I travel for work often, I want to make sure that my wife and kids are safe? Great. That's an easy answer and a very logical answer. For the vast majority of our clients, I find that it's usually our entry-level security door and window, which is, we call it the Embassy series. 95% of the time, that's going to be more than adequate. Because it is such an incredibly high level of security that for most of us, that's all you need. You don't need the 15-minute forced entry. You don't need the level 8 bullet resistant that's going to stop a 7.62 or a 5.56 round. We start with the basics. That's my default. And unless a client really has other concerns, fears, then typically that Embassy series door, that entry level door, that's going to be more than adequate. And I tell clients sometimes, like, hey, we've used this Embassy series door on G7 head of state residences. Like, it's a really good door.
It's good.
You'll be okay. It's going to buy you a lot of time for the cops to arrive.
That sounds like that'll do the trick. I know that a lot of burglars gain access into a home through the front door. Actually, that's where most burglars come through, right? And oftentimes it's them kicking down the door or like picking the lock, prying it open somehow. So I wonder if, do many of your clients, maybe they've had something happen where they were broken into, and now that, like, through the front door specifically, and then that's the solution, they reach out to you for that? Or do you think just maybe it's mostly like just preemptive, precautionary that they put this in place?
We definitely do get calls sometimes from people who say, hey, we had a break-in a month ago, 6 months ago, so this is very much on our mind. And we want to make sure that we never fall victim to this again. There are certainly those clients who reach out because they've been scarred, and it's an incredibly traumatizing experience to go through. And you can only sympathize with people who have been through that already. Then other times, maybe they have moved to a new neighborhood, or they've lived elsewhere. They've lived overseas and have been exposed to different types of security doors, and then move somewhere in the US and say, oh, actually, I want something like what I had over there. I really like that. Sometimes it'll be from tragedies that happen, things that make it in the news. There's no shortage of tragic events that happen on any given day, and that unfortunately really raises people's awareness and the number of people who reach out to us.
Right. Sure. So I definitely want to talk about these safe rooms that you guys engineer and offer. What is a safe room? Like, what isn't a safe room?
So at the most basic level, conceptually, a safe room is a space where you are going to go in an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
There's some threat, perceived threat, risk, and you need to close yourself off in a safe environment until help can arrive.
Yeah.
Or until you can retrieve a weapon, evaluate what's happened. And the best way to think of it is most of us have been in bed at night when the home alarm goes off.
Yeah.
The alarm trips for one reason or another. Maybe we forgot to fully close a door and the wind blew it open. Maybe it was the neighbor's cat. Maybe it was a faulty wire. Any number of reasons that can set off your alarm.
Mm-hmm.
And typically this happens at the moment of deepest sleep.
Yes, I can attest.
It takes time. It takes time to figure out what's going on. Retrieve a weapon, call the cops. It just takes time to do that, whether it's 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. What a safe room does, what a security room does, is it buys you that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I am a strong believer that the single most important door in a home is the master bedroom door.
Mm-hmm.
Either that or a hallway door leading to the bedrooms or leading to the second floor, so that preemptively you
Mm-hmm.
can seal yourself every night in a secure environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, when the alarm does go off, if something happens, you've bought yourself all that time to react.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about someone busting through your bedroom door 15 seconds after the alarm has gone off, because you know every night when you go to sleep, you are putting yourself and your family in a secure space.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So safe rooms at their core, safe rooms, panic rooms, is the safest you can make a room in your house. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to reinforce the floors and the walls. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to replace the door even.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on your budget. Sometimes it's a matter of saying, hey, our master closet, or this room, that room, let's add a few extra deadbolts to that door.
Yep.
Or maybe we're going to replace that door with a hollow metal door with extra bolts on it. Okay, you go out to Home Depot and buy a steel door with a couple extra deadbolts.
Yeah.
It's just creating a room that you will go to in an emergency when
Right.
you need time to react, when you need time to call the cops, when you need time to retrieve a weapon. That, at its essence, that is what a safe room is. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean you have to go to the utmost extremes of the type of products that we offer with the high security doors, the windows, reinforcing the walls. Those are all great. And if you are concerned about certain threats, then yeah, it may make sense. It may be necessary for you. The vast majority of us, that's not the case. The vast majority of us, it's opportunistic crime. I live in a nice neighborhood, in a nice home, and I'm worried about someone trying to break in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
That's the most common scenario that most of us are going to face, unless we're on a local mob hit list or a terrorist list or something like that.
Sure.
The need for these types of things is really broader than we appreciate at first glance, though, because one story that I cite quite often in Washington, in DC, and family that lived very close to where I used to live, the father, his name was Savas Savopoulos, and this was in about 2014 or 2015, I think it was. And he owned a successful steel business. One of his former employees who had been fired, a disgruntled former employee, came to his house, and things ended really badly. I won't go into the details, but it was a very tragic event. They all lost their lives. That's a disgruntled former employee situation. He was not on any hit lists.
Yeah.
He ran a successful business. employees come and go, sometimes on good terms, sometimes on bad terms.
Yeah.
It's the type of situation that we don't want to think about.
Right.
That is very real and very prevalent.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned a bit ago in like the design of the home when it might be smart to have like a security door in a hallway that's like leading back to bedrooms, because it could buy you that time, especially when you have like kids. Like we have kids in our home, right? And we're in different rooms, obviously. That can kind of keep everybody together. And I feel like
Hopefully all night.
yeah, yeah. Well, yes, that's another story.
Yeah,
With
my
the
daughter
real
was
young
in my
one.
room bright and early.
Yes, right, exactly. But I feel like that should be like a baseline design of like how homes are built with
Yeah,
just how the world is changing. And
I always try and think about how can we get the best value out of
Mhm.
just one door, because oftentimes that might be all the customer can afford. Even that might be a stretch financially, but how do we ensure that they are getting the most out of that one door? Not
Yeah,
saying to them, oh well, you really need to replace all the doors in your home. That's a bit of an absurd statement because that's really expensive.
yeah,
So how do we get the most out of one? And there, in the design of homes, sometimes it allows us to get a lot of value out of one door. You can put it
hmm
in a hallway, but when you can't, again, I fall back to the master bedroom door because I think that's the single most important
yeah,
door in the home.
sure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your third generation. Sherry asks, who's going to run the fourth generation of the business?
Well, I don't know if my 5-month-old son has feelings about it yet,
Yeah,
but if the genes are strong, then he won't have much of a choice.
yeah, right, right.
Uh,
That's true. So, and related to that, Maya asks, what do you see as the future of the industry? I'm also very curious about that.
it is still very much in its infancy in the
Mhm.
U.S. and people will sometimes say, "Oh, well, oh, now there are more competitors. There's this, there's that." Competition does not bother me in the least. I
Mhm.
think it is great for this industry because the more players that one, it's a huge market, and
Mhm.
two, the more players out there, the more the market and the more the industry develops. Because at the core of all of this is education,
Mhm.
educating architects, educating builders and general contractors, educating security consultants, many of whom just don't have the knowledge base for high security doors and windows.
Mhm.
And ultimately, educating end users and raising awareness about the need and the use cases for these types of doors.
Mhm.
As I was saying before, unfortunately, a lot of what drives this are tragedies.
Mhm.
There's another example that I talk about. Young girl in rural Wisconsin. Her name is Jamie Kloss,
Mhm.
and not we're not talking about the rich and famous here.
Yeah.
Her parents, Jim and Denise, worked at the local meatpacking plant. And she was 13 or 14 at the time, and she was followed home by a guy who had become infatuated with her. And one night, late at night, he came to the house, and Jamie's father, Jim, went to the front door to see who was there. This was after midnight, and
Mhm.
Jim was shot and killed through the door.
Mhm.
Guy entered the house. Jamie's mom, Denise, hid with her in a locked bathroom. Of course, they went to any space they could where they could lock a door.
Yeah.
To them, that was the safest place that she could think of.
Yeah.
Um, he found them in there, murdered Denise in front of Jamie,
Wow.
and then kidnapped Jamie. And he held her hostage under his bed for 88 days until one day he was out and Jamie built up the courage to try and escape. And now this was a very big news story at the time in Wisconsin, throughout the Midwest, really most parts of the country. And so the woman who found her knew immediately who she was. This brings me back to crime is so random, and
Yeah.
you don't need to be a celebrity or a billionaire to have a use case or a need for a safe space in your home where you can lock the door and buy yourself a few minutes for help to arrive. Again,
Yeah.
the tragedy is that it's these tragedies driving awareness, and people's understanding as to the need. Sandra Bullock on a 911 call when she had a stalker in her home, and this is all public records. I'm not talking about anything confidential, and she's locked herself in her safe room. That's very interesting, but most of us can't really relate to that, to a
Yeah.
stalker breaking. That's not everyday people
Yeah.
stuff. Jamie's story, unfortunately, really is, and the randomness of it. Rural Wisconsin.
Yeah.
There's nothing fancy going on here.
Mhm.
Those stories are what most of us can relate to a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially those of us with kids too. That's very heavy and tragic for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Sherry mentions in the chat too that in the recent attacks in Minnesota, she says, I believe some of the victims were shot through the door. So yeah, it's a thing.
Unfortunately,
So, yeah. Glad we have people like you around. So, what do you, kind of like switching gears a little bit? Do you see like new tech playing a pivotal role in the future? Maybe like especially AI. I know a lot of companies are adopting AI for different reasons, and they're going to into the future. Is that playing a role in your field?
It might.
Mhm.
I don't know, and maybe this is just my own lack of imagination or creativity. Um, a lot of customers like the bells and whistles and the tech interface on doors.
Mhm.
Personally, and this might just have to do with my upbringing, I'm a big fan of an old fashioned key. I think
Yeah.
that is the safest and the most reliable device we have.
Mhm.
Because the moment we start networking in our security devices or our safe rooms and panic rooms and the access control around that, we also dramatically lower the barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Because if I am a semi-skilled hacker or programmer that can get into a unsecured, moderately secured network, then
Mhm.
I'm in. I don't need to bring a weapon or a sledgehammer or anything else.
Yeah.
Your fortifications and safe rooms and all of that are not. I'm in.
Yeah.
So personally, we offer all the technology because that's what customers are asking for. Um, but big picture, I see that as vulnerabilities.
Right. All right. This is my last question for you, and it might be kind of loaded. So, if you were building a home today for like yourself and your family, what are 3 features that are kind of non-negotiable for you? And let's say like you can't say security doors, at least.
So the way I'll answer that question is
Mhm.
what constitutes a comprehensive security system? Because people will sometimes say, "Oh, I've got an alarm. I have cameras. Pardon me. I have
Mhm.
an alarm. I have cameras. I'm good." And the reality is, alarms and cameras are very good investigative and
Mhm.
monitoring tools, but they are not going to stop a determined intruder.
Yeah.
Locked doors and windows will stop determined intruders. Ideally, security doors and windows will stop a determined intruder.
Yeah.
Now, cameras and alarm systems still have a very important part to play in a comprehensive system
Mhm.
because, yes, they do provide some deterrent effect. If you have motion sensor lighting outside your home, that's great, especially if it's linked in with a smartphone app that you can set off a siren. Like I have outside of our factory, we have motion sensor lighting everywhere. I can set off a siren. If someone is trying to break in and a siren is going off, they're not sticking around.
Right.
When we talk about opportunistic crime, they're looking for the easiest target. They're not looking for a fight. So motion sensor lighting, especially that you can set off sirens, or you can talk through it as well. Those are great. Alarm systems, absolutely. Someone tries breaking a window, that makes a difference, and that can have a deterrent effect as well. So that's really where and there are people who are far more intelligent when it comes to landscaping as well. But for me, the low-hanging fruit is really good lighting, motion sensors, an alarm system, and security doors and windows. There's one other example that I can give where there was a complete breakdown in those elements. And this is the case of Paul Pelosi, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, who 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was, home was broken into at night and he was violently attacked. Now, they are not customers of mine. I have absolutely no firsthand knowledge. I will bet you they have a safe room.
Yeah.
Why? What happened? So I will also bet that it's a safe room in maybe a master closet, in a bedroom, something like that, in a bathroom. It's not their bedroom door. It's not their master bedroom door, which is what I was talking about earlier. So they have a camera system there monitored by Capitol Police. It wasn't being monitored at the time because she wasn't there.
Yeah.
She has a security detail. It's with her, not with him. The alarm hadn't been armed. So you had all of these failures in the monitoring, and it was helpful afterwards, the cameras as an investigative tool to understand what happened, but that's only after the fact.
Yeah.
He wasn't deterred by the existence of cameras. The alarm system didn't go off when he broke glass. That was a failure. That might have woken Paul up. But at the end of the day, he was lying in bed with a guy standing over him with a hammer.
Yeah.
All of these security elements work in conjunction with one another, but they all have to be implemented and they all have to be used. And that's what comes together in a comprehensive security system. There's not just one pillar to it. There are a lot of different parts, and each part serves a different purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I agree with all that 100%. And from that definitely checks out too from what we've heard from other security experts on the channel, kind of having that like that ring of security, if you will, comprehensive 360 look at your home from the perimeter, outside, and then entry, and then even inside. So yeah, that's it's all great.
And we see it often in video clips afterwards where a would-be intruder going to a back door, motion activated light comes on, and they leave. That's all it actually takes.
Yep.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but it's an amazing starting point.
Yeah.
And it's an easy thing to implement. It's not expensive, can be effective. It might be all you need. So it's certainly one that we should all be putting in.
That's right. Yeah, we like to say around here, criminals are cowards. So when they're exposed by light, they typically scram. But yeah. Cool. Well, this has been a very insightful conversation, Sam. I appreciate your time. We will definitely have to do this again at some point if you're willing. So yeah.
Absolutely.
And thanks, chat. Thanks everybody for your great, poignant questions. And we'll do it again. So.